In studio with New York Times best-selling author John Gilstrand.
Good morning.
Former delegate John Doyle.
Good morning.
And if I remember, for a few years, Deputy Revenue Secretary.
I was Deputy Secretary of Revenue for 3 years under Governor Earl Ray Tomblin.
Yeah. Did you like that job, by the way?
I very much like that job.
Because you're kind of a getting to the weeds, data-driven guy, aren't you?
I am in the weeds often. I've been accused of that.
Policy and such. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Weeds, plural, not weed.
Correct. I tried weed a couple of times after I got back from Vietnam, and both times I'd take one puff and choke like the Dickens and have to drink a whole glass of water. So I said, I'm just going to drink beer.
Well, at least it kept you well hydrated, I guess.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Good morning, kids, as you're home from school.
Honestly, didn't see the show taking that turn when I opened it back up here in this half hour. But why not? Why not? Hey, we are pleased to welcome back to the program Joyce White, Deputy Superintendent of Operations in the Jefferson County School System. Joyce, thank you for coming back in today.
Thank you for having me.
How are you enjoying your 2-hour delay?
Well, I'm with you, so I'm enjoying it very well this morning.
That's a very nice comeback on that one. That's it. We didn't quite get the snow mess that they were kind of projecting last night.
We
you guys have to be proactive, though.
Yeah, we like to be proactive. You know, they built in these days, 5 days into our calendar are built. So this won't exceed some of them, because if we get them in school and they can do some learning today, and they will, then we'll be good.
Yeah. You know, there was some talk during the pandemic that we may never have another snow day again because we had transitioned to virtual learning. And the thought was, well, if we have a snow day, it's just virtual learning that day instead of enjoying a snow day. That really never did materialize.
It just didn't pan out. You know, I think for learning, especially for young ones, it's so hard to capture their attention and make that connection over an internet or a screen. A lot of kids just aren't built for that. I know there are a few kids that thrive on it and that can learn that way. I know my son deplored it. He just didn't like it. He liked the human connection, the interaction with peers, and so I would call it, it got us through a hard time, but I wouldn't call it a success.
And you mentioned connection. Internet connection in and of itself can be a challenge.
It can be a challenge, especially for students that live in remote areas where there's not internet. And you can give them a hotspot, but if you're not getting a cell phone signal, you're not getting anywhere with that.
But at least we now know.
We do.
That if something like this happens again, there are things we know that we should not do.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think it was a great learning opportunity. Difficult time for sure. Don't want to look back there, but I think we've had some takeaways. You're
right.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
What to do and what not to do.
Right.
I think we kind of buried the lead there because you're talking about snow days. So forget about whether kids learn well at home. If there's snow outside, kids are going to be in the snow. You can say that they're going to be in front of their computer, but they're not going to be.
Yeah, right.
Joyce, we spoke with you within this past year, a couple of different major topics, one of which was the potential closing of North Jefferson Elementary School. What has become of that?
That is correct. So I guess I want to say before Thanksgiving, the board decided to take it off the agenda and leave North Jefferson open, much to the delight of the children and the parents and the school community. So we're pleased to be able to keep that school open and operational as we move forward. So it will definitely not close and proceed as normal.
Did Jefferson put in any requests with the school building authority during this last go-around?
We did not put any requests in for the school building authority simply because we're still completing some major projects. While I'm delighted that Ranson's finished, and on January 6th we'll welcome the Ranson population into that new school. We're still building Shepherdstown. We have a Washington auxiliary gym to go. So we have some projects on our plate that we need to fiscally mind, and not ready to take on anything new yet. But we will be. We will be. Give us time.
I passed the new Shepherdstown location on my drive home many times, and it's coming along quite nicely.
It is coming along quite nicely.
Yeah. Tell me about the opening of the new Ranson School.
So we're going to give everybody a sneak peek. So I want to welcome everybody to come out and see our new school. It is quite awesome. We'll be doing that December 11th from 5 to 7 p.m. The doors will be open, and you can take a self-guided tour. Staff will be there to assist with that. And we're very pleased to welcome anybody and everybody in that wants to come and have a look at the new school.
How many students will this accommodate?
It'll accommodate 450 students, max.
And how many will be moving in?
Just Ranson will be moving in. I believe that their population is under 300 at this time, but during the last board meeting on Monday night, the board actually voted to redistrict. We have some areas of growth, in particular in Jefferson, and my team and I presented a lot of data about where the growth areas are in Jefferson and how we should align ourselves with that growth to leave space in schools for the bigger developments that are either underway or coming. And besides that, Ranson Elementary, and I think this is a well-known fact, if it's not, it's spoiler alert, or I'll share it with you. It doesn't lie in its own district. So T.A. Lowry, our other elementary school, kind of comes in there to Ranson and takes those students. So we're going to give Ranson back some of those students and then shift TA and align their district a little bit. Driswood also sees a lot of growth, and so Driswood and Shipley will exchange a few students. Shipley will give a few to Driswood because Driswood has a capacity of 600, and C.W. Shipley is a much smaller school, and it is always full.
Where's
at C.W.
Driswood?
Shipley. Driswood is off Job Corps Road.
Oh, okay.
So it sits relatively close to Jefferson High School.
And not too far from St. Michael's Park.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mr. Doyle, did you have a question for Ms. Kilmer?
I have several.
Kilmer, I said Kilmer. My goodness, it's Joyce Kilmer.
That's
Joyce
it.
White. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I will never see.
At 9:30 this morning,
Yes.
the Jefferson County Commission is meeting,
Yes.
and one of the items on the agenda is whether or not to reimpose school impact fees.
Correct.
Technically, to raise them up from the $1 they were reduced, 4 or 5 years ago from something like 8,500 was my recollection, but I could be wrong about that. But it's somewhere along in there, down to $1. And they're going to be discussing that. Will you be in attendance at that meeting?
That is my next stop.
I figured.
Yes, I will.
Will you be on the agenda to speak, or will you speak during public comment, or are you just going to go there as an observer?
Well, Dr. Bishop will actually arrive probably before I do.
Okay.
And so I don't know that he'll sign up for public comment. Generally, we've been in attendance, and at the last meeting, we were asked to speak a little bit. So our board chair stepped forth and did that in our behalf. But yes, it is on the agenda for a possible vote today.
Does the board have any collective opinion about what that figure ought to be?
So I don't speak for the board.
Right.
I always start with that disclaimer.
I guess that means there's not an official collective opinion. Okay.
Not-
You've
right.
answered my question.
Right. I think they would all like to see them come back. And part of the process is that a survey is completed, that all of the stakeholders, Parks and Rec, some of the county agencies, pay for a survey, and Tischler Bice has completed that survey, and they are the ones that actually gather the data and make the recommendation to the commission.
Okay.
So I know they've heard from Carson Bice numerous times. Carson has, mined my data and spoken with me, so it's been a collaboration of data for quite some time to arrive at this point.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Gilstrap.
Circling back to the North Jefferson Elementary, that seemed to somebody at some point that seemed like a good idea to close that school.
Right.
What were those issues? What drove that?
Well, the issues I think that people considered, North Jefferson has it's our lowest population, and over the last 10 years, our data shows that they really haven't grown. They've had -3 students on average. So their population remains fairly steady. It's a small school. And so I think some consideration was given the population and all the statistics do we have. Is it fiscally reasonable? Is it, the right thing to do to close that facility? And so that's what the board worked through. I followed a policy to do that. So it was a formal process for me in just providing all of the data that I could so that the board can make an informed decision. They had 2 hearings and they listened to the community. And I think that had a great impact and a great outcome for everybody. So they did take that off of the table. There was no official vote, but the school will definitely remain open, and we'll just do some redistricting.
Which, had it closed,
Right.
and those teachers then would have been sent somewhere else, say to the newly opening.
Right.
Elementary
There
school?
is a whole human resource process in education, and seniority can come into play. So there was a plan within our documents. What would happen to the teachers? Would they be transferred? Would there be a reduction in force process? And so, because we're always seeking highly qualified teachers, and we have some long-term subs, everybody would have still had a job, just at a new location.
And this is something that I think about frequently when we talk about the population growth in the Eastern Panhandle, and which is obviously going to trigger new schools. I understand we have a hard time getting and keeping teachers in the Eastern Panhandle to begin with.
Yes.
So now, as we're opening a school next month, and now we've got the other one that's under construction, do we have the supply of teachers to?
We do. It's just a move of the staff. These schools
But
are.
isn't it a zero-sum game? Don't you have to take a teacher from one? If they're already here, you have to take them from one school to put in a new one, and then what happens to the old school?
Well, these are replacement schools. So it's not like the old Ranson is going to remain open. It's
I
just
see.
a migration it's just an upgrade of a facility that was in a condition where it warranted a new school. Like, we have some facilities that are 100 years old in our county. So it's a matter of, at some point they wear out and you have to replace those.
But Ranson, for example, and I think this is true of Shepherdstown, they're not just replacement facilities. They're built, pardon me, to accommodate more students than the older buildings they're replacing. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So there is some growth that is anticipated.
Correct.
And what I thought, and you may or may not know whether this is correct or not, but my suspicion about listening to the arguments from the board, the staff, wherever they came from, about the argument for closing North Jefferson, is that between 2010 and 2020, Jefferson County's growth slowed to a comparative trickle compared to what it had been the previous 40 years.
Correct.
And I suspect some people began thinking this was going to hold. But since 2020, and actually I think more like since 2019, it has gone back up to roughly what it was before, which is about 1.5% per year. That is what the average had been from 1970 to about 2010. Right. And then from 2010 to 2020, it was about 0.5% per year. So it was much, much less growth than people had thought. And my suspicion is that some of that was built into the idea, well, we're building this new Ranson Elementary and we're building it bigger than the old Ranson Elementary. Maybe we don't need North Jefferson.
Right. All of that kind of had to be looked at. And, people can talk or speculate, but until you actually mine the data and take a look at it and let people have access to everything that you know about student population and trends, I think you have to go through that process to arrive at the solution. And I think it was very forward thinking of the board to be able to take the data, look at it, some of it like, oh, well, I didn't know that, about that trend data, and take a look at it and then make the informed decision that, it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. The situation we're in Jefferson County, and I'm sure you well know this, John, is that we see growth. And some people are coming into Jefferson with children, and some people aren't.
Right.
The median age in Jefferson, for example, is 41 years. We have seen a growth in 2024 of 1.33%, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. So, yes, there's growth, and we see lots of big developments coming. In the middle of this process, for example, we learned of Bird Hill subdivision, which lies right off 480, but it's also in the North Jefferson district.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of, most of it lies in Jefferson.
480 homes.
720.
Oh, 720.
720 are planned.
That's
so in studying that and then that cropping up while it's still in a concept phase in Jefferson, I think you need to look and plan a little bit for the future and say what's really out there, and should we close something given the little boom of houses that's occurring. We know it's occurring in Ranson. I showed the Ranson City Council through the new school the other day, and they were like, you hear the hammering, you hear the growth, you can just stand here and hear it. And they are very proactive and very excited about growth, particularly in that area. So I know that they'll continue to make the best of Ranson and to welcome people into it.
Joyce, what is the projection for a 720 resident development in regards to children that come out of that development? What's the formula for that?
Our formula is generally right around like 0.52 per household. So we started studying developments. And if you looked at our presentation from Monday, you'll see a development such as Huntfield, where they've added homes. We've yielded more students. Some other developments in Jefferson, people moved in, their kids have now grown. So there's actually been a loss in those developments that have not gained more homes. But the more homes you're seeing, you can probably apply a formula of 0.52. So we start looking at formulas and developments and how many students are we yielding per home on average out of those developments in order to kind of plan.
And then the next part of that formula would be, and what is the average age of those 0.52 students? Because someone who's 5 is going to be in your school system a lot longer than someone who's 17.
Right. Yeah, we can also break it down very easily by grade level.
And how does that usually feather out?
We're seeing right now a rise in high school students. There are a population of people, I think, that for the elementary years take advantage of homeschool, Hope Scholarship. They tend to migrate back in during high school. So I would say there are more older kids, and I'd have to relook at that, than there would be the younger ones. But our pre-K numbers, if you look at the trend table, while they're slightly down, they remain steady and about the same.
We talked with Dr. Ryan Sachs, the superintendent of schools in Berkeley County, yesterday, and we were asking about the Hope Scholarship scenario where parents take the Hope Scholarship, the kid goes to a school, they enroll in August, September, October, November comes along, you know what, we're going back to the public school because the money doesn't follow them back to the public school after the month of October, because October is the census month.
Yes.
Are you seeing that issue in Jefferson County? And is it, frankly, at this point enough that raises an eyebrow that you're going to have to do without this money from November to June?
No, it really does not. I know the state has, and I'm not completely on the instructional side, so forgive me, but with the formula for Hope Scholarship, if they decide to come in and participate some, you can request that you can bill the family and say, we're going to take some Hope Scholarship money for you to come in and attend art or to attend music or whatever. If they're in our full time count by the time October comes around, then we're good to go. But if they're not, then you may request and bill for some of that money back.
Does Hope Scholarship money go to the family?
No.
Okay.
But
I mean, they request, I think they turn in receipts, and the way it works, you don't receive the money. It's just a little account where you can withdraw the money for eligible expenses that the state determines are.
Nice.
But it does go to the family.
Doesn't go to the school that they're attending.
No, it doesn't come to the school. It stays with the state, but it's not like cashing out to the family, is my understanding.
That is correct. But I was on the finance committee when.
Oh, I'm sure you know more than I.
I'm sorry, the education committee when we passed this bill, and I was vigorously opposed to it. The family requests.
Yes.
For XYZ. And the State Department of Education, there are certain things that they have to approve. And for example, if the family wants to buy a computer,
Right.
which is legitimate for the children's education.
Right.
But one of my concerns was, suppose a family is also going to use this computer for their own personal use. They've had the whole thing paid for by the state. But I'm digressing. Let me get back to the question. That's great if if a child comes back in for a particular class or two.
Yes.
I think what Rob was talking about was
Full-time.
a situation where after November, the child comes back in full time.
Right.
I don't think you get the money
Oh, no.
back.
Oh, absolutely we don't.
And that's what's missing from the funding formula.
Who's holding that money at that point?
The state has already reserved it to go to the family to go to the private school or to homeschool.
So if we're in November, just in this hypothetical,
Yeah.
a lot of that money, was it $4,000, $5,000, whatever it is?
$4,800.
Okay. So a good part of that $4,800 has not yet gone to Our Lady of Perpetual Education, whatever the private school was, right?
Right.
So you got $2,000, whatever it is, sitting in an account. What happens to that money? If it doesn't go to the public school, where does it go?
I think it stays with the State Department of Education.
Okay.
I think. I'm not sure. I remember we asked this question in the Education Committee, and we got like 6 or 7 different answers. And the committee passed the darn bill anyway. I'm sorry.
No, that's
one
okay.
of my great frustrations in not being able to get answers.
Well, here and that's an issue, and John Gilstrap just kind of fleshed that out a little bit further than where I'd been taking it too. So as much as we've talked about this, each time you do, you learn a little bit more about how this equation works. Joyce, we have about 2.5 minutes left. I'd like to come back to Ranson and the grand opening once again. The students will begin there January 6th.
They will.
And what grades will that be?
K-5.
K to 5. Okay. And again, this is not replacing. This is not in addition to other schools. This replaces the old Branson.
That's
Elementary.
correct, yes.
Right. And you're going to do on the 11th an open house.
We are.
Yeah. Tell us about that again.
We'll be doing an open house. We'll have some light refreshments. People can take self-guided tours. Staff will be available to answer questions and show people around, and that will be 5 to 7 p.m. So we welcome everybody to come out and do it.
With the ability to transfer schools, can anybody in Jefferson County go to Ranson Elementary if they want to transport their kid there?
Yeah, the answer is yes, due to open enrollment. If there is space available, transfers have to be honored. It has to meet 3 criteria, not to be able to attend there. One would be that they're full. So, yes, the answer would be yes.
Seems like there's going to be a bunch of space available, at least right away.
And right away there will be. There's the transfer process begins for next year around this time of year. So we're not looking for any transfers. It's not transfer season, so to speak. If you'd move in district, you'd obviously register there. But next year when we redistrict, and there'd be a new opportunity for that kind of a transfer.
One more quick question, if I could.
1 minute.
I know we're. The plan now for North Jefferson is it's going to be T.A. Lowry is going to be an intermediate, and North Jefferson is just going to have the first 3 grades. Is that right?
That's not correct.
That's not correct. That's what I've read in the newspaper.
Well, that's not correct.
Okay.
So
I'm glad.
Part of the proposal to keep North Jefferson open was to consider making one K2, 3, 5. North is not going to close, so there's no grade reconfiguration
Wonderful.
in the works.
We're not going to have extra busing. Good.
No.
Got that straight. Joyce, thanks so much for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
You always give us great information and clarify any misconceptions or any incorrect assumptions that we have made here.
Right.
At least one of us here at the table. So thank you.
One of us.
Thank you.
This is Talk Radio, WRNR Martinsburg.